Kicking off the list at number 10, the Ringmaster. Issue 3 of the Incredible Hulk back in Volume 1, we see the Hulk take on the Ringmaster. Will the mighty Hulk be a match for the Ringmaster? Well, apparently, yeah. He takes on a whole circus of crime who, might I add, do not have any superpowers, but right off the bat, the human cannonball gets the Hulk quite good. The human cannonball, just a regular guy with a makeshift hammer. This dude's spine would fold on impact if he cannonballed into the Incredible Hulk, so already I'm upset. And then it gets worse. A regular guy with a fireman's hose blasts the Hulk, and then he goes down, this time for good. I mean, I know the Hulk's mind was being toyed with here a bit, but the fact that a crime circus was able to best him in the first place, not okay. Not okay. Number 9, Doc Ock. In Eric Larson's 1992 Spider-Man run, issue 19 titled Revenge of the Sinister Six showed us a more powerful version of Doc Ock because he had new, fancier arms. In fact, the whole crew had the jump on Peter at this point. He was for sure in need of backup. And right on cue, the Hulk smashes through the floor, just sending wood chips all over the damn place. Already such a mess. And he's coming in hot too. The Hulk says knock knock when he busts out of the floor. That is so badass. First he flicks Shocker out of the way, gives him the finger, literally, and then he tosses Mysterio back to sleep. And then when he goes to handle Doc Ock, he's caught off guard from his unbreakable arms with limitless power. Doc Ock had the upper hand, or 4 upper hands, I guess, in this case. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be awesome. No sweat, but it does help us out quite a bit. I'm not going to waste any more time. Thank you so much. For the best. Back to this list. Number 8, the Hulk Killer. With a name like that, you already know how this one's going to end. Created by Sam Stearns, the leader, Hulk Killer first appeared in Tales to Astonish, issue 86. Some detectives are going through the leader's notes. They're finding out that he's created these humanoids, but the Hulk destroyed them all but one. This humanoid was built specifically to take down the Hulk, so the cops call in General Ross. They figure this ought to be an asset in some way, shape, or form for the government, but if only they could bring it to life, because, you know, what would possibly go wrong? So they bring him to life, and it all goes wrong. He just leaves, he walks right out of the building, not even fazed one bit by the bullets, of course. Then the Hulk arrives, they battle it out, and they break their surroundings, but Hulk Killer just simply absorbs all these hits. Next, Hulk Killer beats Hulk so hard, he reverts back into his banner form. It's embarrassing. Number 7, Juggernaut. Kane Marco has been one of Marvel's biggest and baddest since his first appearance in X-Men issue 12. Once Marco came into contact with a gem, he then obtained the power of the Crimson Bands of Sidorak, becoming a human Juggernaut. Literally. The Hulk on average can beat Juggernaut, but in Incredible Hulk issue 402, Hulk bumps into this Jack dude who he realizes is not just an ordinary construction worker after all, rather it's Marco. Hulk thinks he has him. He tries to save Juggernaut's life after he falls into quicksand, but then he tries to pull Hulk in as well, so Hulk's like, alright, forget it, I'm gonna let you sink. See ya. Then of course he popped out of the quicksand and the beating continued, and it kept going and going, and the Hulk went down until he was almost dead. And that's when Red Skull stepped in and told Kane that was enough beating for now. Number 6, Zax. Making its first appearance in the Incredible Hulk issue 166, the Thing from the Dynamo was originally the result of an accident that happened at Edison Nuclear Power Plant. When a group of criminals tried to power off New York City, it went south, you know, the toughest gang in town, shutting down the power during Game of Thrones. That's truly, truly awful. Keep it up, guys. So guns started blazing and it caused this massive chain reaction in the atomic reactor, and then this living energy then absorbed them, and then soon took a humanoid form with a villain voice as well, of course. Zax absorbs the electricity from its victims' minds as well, so it gains their thoughts. Hawkeye comes in with a convenient foam arrow. In fact, Hawkeye's aim saved the day here, but they don't give him credit. They actually give the Hulk the credit, which is pretty rough. But don't worry, Hulk got what was coming from Zax when General Ross merged with the living energy and then beat down Hulk and Rick Jones. Ross was actually about to finish the pair off, but Zax's personality came back and then he flew off. That was a close call, Banner. A little too close. Number 5, Brian Banner. The father of Bruce Banner was honestly a pretty horrible guy. He killed Bruce's mother is honestly pure evil, and he of course was locked away for 15 years afterwards, and then when him and Bruce reunited down the road, Bruce accidentally killed him. Yikes. Now this isn't the end of his story though, because during the Chaos War storyline in Incredible Hulk's issue 619, his dad comes back as a Hulk demon who would get stronger the angrier Banner got. Now obviously this is a traumatic experience, going down memory lane can hurt quite a bit, so this demon Hulk dad would have finished off Bruce if Jarella didn't step in to save the day. Bruce has the brain and Brian's got the pain. The Banners are a wild bunch. Number 4. Horfin. Born the offspring of a frost giant and Fenris, Horfin first appeared in the Incredible Hulk issue 422. When the Warriors 3 and the Hulk were going after Agamemnon, they followed them to Singard Castle. Horfin was created purely to guard this castle, so now the Hulk has to fight a frost wolf. And this is pretty intimidating because when the frost giant Singard himself unleashed his Horfin, the order was to kill the Hulk right off the bat. No warning, nothing. Just go eat him. Bye, go. And it did. Yeah, I did mention this wolf was incredibly big, right? What a snack. Number 3, Pit. Image Comics introduced Pit in Youngblood issue 4. It was their version of the Hulk. He's an alien-human hybrid created by the Creed as a literal death machine. So 5 years later, Marvel gave the fans the ultimate battle and released Hulk Pit Reality Check. This was just 50 pages of punching and smashing and kicking. It's exactly what you would expect and want. But Pit remained on top for the most part of this fight, and you gotta include Image Comics whenever we can, because Pit is a treat. He's also drooling and jacked. He's just a nightmare. I would never want to deal with him. Number 2, Thanos. This is the only movie reference in this list, but I do have to include it. The time Thanos punched the Hulk in the neck so hard that the beast straight up retired. Avengers Infinity War, directed by the lovely Russo brothers, before the title card even pops up in the movie, before it's like, bam, Avengers, the Incredible Hulk is gone. You don't see him anymore. He pops out and tries to get the upper hand on Thanos, and without even using the Power Stone, Thanos rock and boppers his neck. Now, we don't see the Hulk after this for 5 whole years. And even then, he's like taking selfies and dabbing. It's not the same at all. And finally, number 1, Maestro. Maestro comes from an alternate future on Earth 9200, the Future Imperfect storyline. Now this takes place 90 years in the future, and that Hulk had basically just absorbed all this radiation from our fallen planet over time. He gets stronger, and unfortunately he also gets smarter. This isn't a dumb Hulk that gets, hosed down at a circus. This is the Maestro we're talking about. So our Incredible Hulk goes to fight him, but on the way into the massive city of Dystopia, appropriately named, Hulk finds all these weapons and artifacts from all of our fallen heroes. This new world was much harder to survive in, even with superpowers. And that's when Hulk meets up with his old friend, Rick Jones. Rick fills Banner in that basically everybody's dead except for those residing in Maestro's dystopia. He would keep the radiation level low enough for people to survive, but he would also keep it high enough for him to continue being powered up. Maestro ends up Minecrafting his way to Jones' secret base, and the two Hulks come face to face. Now part 2 of the story is obviously just a massive fight. Maestro is terrifying. He calls Banner out on a bluff, and then he just tosses a lady to smithereens. Like, he actually doesn't care. He'll kill anybody in his way. It's terrifying. Hulk hits him where the sun doesn't shine, and Maestro sneaks up and breaks his neck, ending the battle and the story just like that.
Number 10, Omega Red. While Omega Red has also lost to Wolverine in the past, he's also had his fair share of victories against him. Omega Red initially proved almost too powerful to Wolverine, especially when it came to the use of death spores which weakened him. There was a time when Omega Red successfully captured the hero, and he only succeeded in surviving by getting help to escape, unfit to take on Omega Red alone. More recently in the comics, Omega Red surfaced wanting to join Krakoa, but he was actually revealed to be in league with Dracula, and in fact helped Dracula to get his hands on Wolverine's blood, enabling the villain to walk in the sun. Since then, Omega Red has chosen to portray Dracula being truthful with the mutants and becoming their true ally, but Logan of course still finds it hard to trust him. He doesn't really believe he's the true ally. Perhaps because Wolverine himself remembers all the times that Omega Red has stabbed him in the front and the back, and just basically stabbed him all around with his carbonadium tentacles. Number 9, Mysterio. Mysterio in an alternate reality completely defeats Wolverine, and in the most horrible way. In the Old Man Logan continuity, Mysterio manipulated Wolverine, getting him to fight against and kill all the X-Men, explaining how this could have happened given all their amazing abilities by claiming that his friends would likely hesitate to take him out. Wolverine at the time thought he was taking on a bunch of supervillains who had invaded the mansion, and Mysterio also claims that Wolverine's ego is kinda to blame for him accepting the illusion. After all, Wolverine believing that he could have possibly taken on all of these supervillains himself all at once does seem pretty arrogant. I gotta say, I kind of agree with Mysterio here. And friends, before we move on to the next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists where we get to tell you stories about people kicking other people's butts, I love telling these stories, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Sabretooth. Sabretooth has beaten Logan so many times that I've personally lost count. Sometimes it seems as though Victor's sole purpose has been to make Wolverine suffer. Case in point, how it became a tradition for Sabretooth to go and mess up Wolverine once a year on his birthday. Sabretooth has also been the mastermind behind a great deal of psychological plots to mess with Logan, including at one point pitting his son Daken against him, forcing Wolverine to kill his own son. Wolverine thought this was how it had to be at the time, but he would actually later learn that it all happened due to the machinations of Sabretooth. People don't often think about how smart Sabretooth is, but he's pretty crafty. Number 7. Mystique. Mystique is one of those villains you don't want to underestimate because, well, it's really dangerous to do so. Case in point, why do I say case in point so much? Who's been saying that to me that I've been putting this in my script? An example being when Wolverine thought he had killed her and would never see her again, only for her to return having been resurrected by the Hand to get revenge on Wolverine for killing her. She not only defeated him in a physical sense, but also in a mental sense, using him to get information and also to mess with his head when she posed as Yukio. She really messed with him. But that's Mystique for you. Number 6. Spore. While Spore was an insanely powerful villain who did end up defeated in the end, it wasn't actually Wolverine that did the defeating in this scenario. Though he did fight against Spore. Spore appears in one of the earlier stories in Wolverine Volume 2 and was created by Archie Goodwin and John Byrne. It was an ancient entity who first appeared in issue 21, where we learned that the drug that was being used to increase the strength of Roundhouse at the cost of his sanity was actually a part of that villain, and that using that drug was kind of how it infected its victims and was able to move more into the physical world through them. Spore, it turned out, was an ancient bioweapon created by the Deviants long ago that had laid dormant on planet Earth after requiring the strength of a Celestial in order to be defeated the first time around. Although Wolverine struggled to defeat this enemy, the possibly mutant healer Sister Salvation managed to use her powers to defeat it, cleansing Spore permanently, but at great cost, with her hands and possibly ability to heal becoming dramatically damaged afterwards. But Wolverine couldn't have done that alone. He needed the Sister Salvation backup for that one. Number 5. Madeline Pryor. Another enemy who Wolverine likely wouldn't stand a chance against is Madeline Pryor. In the What If Inferno issue, we get to see what would happen if Madeline Pryor had won the day and she and Sim basically turned Wolverine into their little pet, unleashing his feral side and making him a complete monster. And I really do mean a complete monster. The hero doesn't even stand a chance against their influence as they help him to give in to the darker side of himself that he's always been working so hard to repress. It's even worse than losing a battle or his life, because in this story Wolverine loses his morality and basically his humanity. I think that's worse. Is that worse than death? I think it's worse than death. If you lose entirely who you are. Number 4. Dracula. Dracula is a long-standing villain for the X-Men and Wolverine. As we discussed earlier with Omega Red, the villain recently managed to best Wolverine by concocting a plan to capture him and use his blood to power up himself and his other loyal vampires, forcing Omega to become his undercover agent on Krakoa. Of course, in the end, Omega Red would turn against him, allowing Wolverine and the other mutants to strike back, but during that first story of the new series back in issue 1, Wolverine saw himself pretty heartily defeated at the hands of Dracula, and what made it worse is that he didn't really even understand at the time that he had been playing right into Dracula's hands. Number 3. Magneto. Magneto is of course another major supervillain who bested Wolverine. He was the one responsible for transforming him into a feral version of himself, stripping Wolverine of the adamantium that coated his skeleton. This was a huge part of us learning more about Wolverine's abilities and his power set. This was when it was revealed that his claws were actually bone claws and they were themselves coated. We also learned here that he had the capacity to be intensely feral. I mean, we'd always known that Wolverine had a wild side, a feral side. It had been alluded to in the comics, but we didn't know just how wild Logan could be. Don't worry though, although Wolverine lost all of his adamantium in the fight against Magneto and his nose, Professor X made sure that Magneto paid for what he'd done, and that he could never hurt anyone again by completely cutting off his mind, in essence kinda leaving Magneto still physically alive but brain dead. It should also be noted that Magneto has killed Wolverine many times across multiple different realities and timelines. Number 2. Apocalypse. Apocalypse is a villain that Wolverine has faced across many different realities, whether with a team or on his own. In some realities, Wolverine has managed to eventually win the war against Apocalypse, but has also lost battles here and there along the way. In the X-Men animated series from the 90s, we see no exception, as Wolverine attempts to take on Apocalypse alongside the X-Men. When it's his turn to strike, he completely misses Apocalypse with his claws, who manages to escape along with most of his horsemen. Kind of embarrassing. Number 1. Dark Phoenix. While Jean Grey would likely never want to hurt Wolverine, and he has honestly almost killed her on a few occasions across the multiverse, always to her benefit of course, usually, to avoid her having to suffer. When Dark Phoenix emerges, it's quickly made apparent just how much stronger this persona and force is in comparison to Wolverine. When the darker side of Phoenix Force makes itself known at one point during Phoenix Endsong, Wolverine doesn't stand a chance against it. In fact, he only survives his fight with the Dark Phoenix because he fits into her plan, with her aiming to use him as bait. It does seem as though he succeeds in weakening the Dark Phoenix, but once again, this seems to all be part of the Phoenix Force's plan, allowing her to take a more active role as she works towards getting what she wants, which she thinks at the time is Cyclops and his unlimited energy source, his optic blasts, but in reality what Phoenix really wants is to feel whole again and feel loved. What a lovely little moral at the end of that story. Number 10. Nightmare. Nightmare is one of Doctor Strange's most iconic villains. In fact, he was the first appearing alongside Doctor Strange in his first appearance. He has done quite a few things to threaten the Earth even while Strange has reigned as Sorcerer Supreme. But aside from that, he's also at one point succeeded in pushing Strange to his limits. During Last Defenders issue number 3, Strange returns to Greenwich Village in New York City to defend it against a stampede from Nightmare's dream realm. Unfortunately, at this point, he's too weak and exhausted to successfully defend against the stampede. Fortunately though, Damon Hellstrom arrives on the scene to lend a hand. But if it weren't for Hellstrom, Strange would surely have been trodden into some pretty dead meat by those dream horses. Woo! Number 9. Baron Mordo. Baron Mordo is another famous villain of Dr. Stephen Strange. While generally Strange is the one who comes out on top, Mordo had actually been plaguing Stephen well before he was ever Sorcerer Supreme, and even before he knew about the existence of Mordo or the Ancient One. Back when Mordo was the Ancient One's disciple, information was actually shared with him of how Stephen Strange was predicted to become the Ancient One's successor as Sorcerer Supreme. Pretty jealous, Mordo began to plague the then child Stephen Strange with nightmares, creating and utilizing a psychic construct. Eventually the Ancient One discovered this and ended Mordo's schemes, but Stephen would continue to be plagued by nightmares throughout his life due to the psychic construct within his mind. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you are loving this channel and you want to show us some love somewhere else, head on over to Facebook, click that follow, click that like, help us on out. Number 8. MCU Caecilius. Technically in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Caecilius won the day. He ultimately lost the war though, as his plan didn't go quite as he'd hoped. But he was successful in opening up a gateway to the Dark Dimension, with which Dormammu could basically use to enter Earth, and our dimension here. Good old Earth 9999999. How many nines is in it? I forget. That reality. At least this is what Caecilius tried to do. In the end, Dormammu was stopped by Doctor Strange, who used his Eye of Agamotto to create a time loop that Dormammu would be forever trapped in until or unless he gave up and decided to leave Earth alone, which did end up happening after countless deaths of Doctor Strange, which also possibly created an infinite number of alternate paths across the multiverse and realities where Strange may actually be dead and where Dormammu was victorious. Who knows? While Strange beat Dormammu and ultimately Caecilius in the end, he was unable to stop the villain from succeeding in his mission to summon Dormammu to Earth. And a win, even if it isn't the final word, is still a win. And in Caecilius' case, he should have been more careful for what he wished for, because he also kind of got what he wanted, which was to live forever, but in pain in the Dark Dimension, so not so great. Not ideal. Number 7. Loki. Loki has managed to pull the wool over Stephen's eyes on more than one occasion. At one point during one of their very first encounters, he managed to trick Strange into thinking that Loki's brother Thor was evil, causing Strange to basically confiscate Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. However, Strange soon realized the deception and as such helped Thor instead to defeat his tricksy brother Loki. Loki. More recently in the comics, Doctor Strange ended up duped by Loki when the trickster god believed he would be more well suited to the role of Sorcerer Supreme, and managed to basically trick Strange out of the role using extremely realistic illusions and deceptive ploys. Steven spent a good amount of time when he was no longer Sorcerer Supreme working as a veterinarian, which is how he met Bats, who would later become his ghostly doggo companion. Number 6. Kaecilius. But this time from the comics. Kaecilius, I would say, is one of Strange's greatest villains. Despite just being the protege or disciple of Baron Mordo in the comics, he still managed to defeat Doctor Strange in the ultimate way, by killing him. Although it seems that Strange wasn't completely caught unawares, as he had a plan in place should this happen, which allowed him to solve the mystery of his own death. And although Kaecilius may have killed Strange, Doctor Strange ended up coming out on top despite the defeat, as his older self managed to avenge his death, dealing Kaecilius a worser fate. His older self, his younger self that's from the past, it's like older but younger. It's confusing. Kaecilius in essence wasn't just killed here, by the way. He was seemingly erased when older or past Doctor Strange, solving the mystery, decided to use Kaecilius to bring back his main continuity self, temporarily at least, casting a healing spell which basically transformed Kaecilius into Strange, in essence resurrecting the version of him that Kaecilius had killed. But that's not very good for him, because then he's like, now I'm the person I killed that I hated the most. Shucks. Number 5. Dormammu. Although these two have fought on multiple occasions, with Doctor Strange managing to best or beat Dormammu, especially if he is on Earth and outside of the Dark Dimension, where he is the most powerful, when they first fought, Dormammu was in the Dark Dimension, and Strange was just kinda starting out as well, so he wasn't at max power. He was sent to the Dark Dimension to battle Dormammu in order to save the world by the Ancient One, who was basically too weak to do battle with Dormammu at the time. Steven went taking his place, but also proved to be not really strong enough to defeat Dormammu. Instead, Steven found a way around that battle, similar to his approach in the MCU. However, instead of trapping Dormammu in a time loop, Steven at this point actually didn't even have the Eye of Agamotto, I don't believe, in the comics. He decided to help him out in order to beat him. You see, Dormammu had to expend energy to maintain a barrier in the Dark Dimension which kept out the mindless ones, and during their battle the distraction of the fight had caused him to drop that barrier. With the mindless ones on the loose, Steven offered to help restore the barrier and keep the mindless ones out, and Dormammu begrudgingly promised that he would give up his attempt to invade Earth as a result. At least this time. Number 4. Enchantress. Oddly enough, despite both being very much tied to the world of magic over at Marvel Comics, Doctor Strange has not really had many battles against Enchantress. However, during the Acts of Vengeance crossover event, the two did end up getting matched up for a battle in his series, Doctor Strange Sorcerer Supreme. In issue number 12, we see these two face off, and Enchantress, along with Executioner, proved to be too much for Strange to handle. First of all, he is successfully seduced into attending a meeting with Amora the Enchantress in the evening, not even seemingly recognizing her as the Enchantress previous to her reveal, and even though people are basically like, don't go there, he does it anyways. Then they begin to battle, and Enchantress and Executioner's Asgardian heritage makes them seemingly too much for Strange to handle. Fortunately, Clea shows up just in time to basically save his magic butt. Number 3. Ultimate Dormammu. Ultimate Dormammu pretty much has the ultimate victory against Doctor Strange on Earth 1610, the Ultimate Universe. He manages to kill Doctor Strange straight up, strangling him with his sash until his head in essence pops off. However, it should also be noted that this Doctor Strange is not the exact counterpart to Earth 616's Doctor Strange. This is actually Stephen Strange Jr., Strange's son, his son with Clea no less. In the Ultimate Universe, Doctor Strange Sr. disappeared many years ago, vanishing without a trace, and no one knows what happened to him. Although Strange Jr. was raised normally on Earth without magic by his mother Clea, he eventually found his way back to it and would go on to become the new Sorcerer Supreme, following in both his father and his mother's more magical footsteps. Unfortunately too, because then he dies as a result of that. Whoops. Number 2. The Undying Ones. The Undying Ones are extremely strong and powerful demonic beings who serve the Nameless One, seemingly inspired by monsters of Lovecraftian design. While Steven has fought against them before and succeeded, initially when dealing with them, even despite besting them, they would end up costing him something. either killing those he sought to protect or just managing to succeed in whatever other devious mission they were up to, just as Doctor Strange arrived to stop them. Because of their ability to be a step ahead, at one point Doctor Strange even gets trapped in their dimension, sacrificing himself in order to close off a portal to Earth. Staying behind, Strange would spend some time imprisoned in their dimension until such a time as the Hulk arrived there, stumbled upon him, and then the two were able to fight their way out due to the sacrifice of someone else staying behind. Strange became imprisoned in Submariner issue number 22 from the 1968 series. If you don't recognize Stephen here, this is because it was back in the day when he used to wear a mask in an attempt to hide his identity from his enemies. Yeah, that was a whole thing, and at one point to maintain that identity, he actually had his name like magically changed to Stephen Saunders. It's the whole time. Number 1. Strange Supreme. Strange Supreme is the dark alternate version of Strange from the alternate MCU reality, appearing in the What If episode What If Doctor Strange Lost His Heart Instead of His Hands. The result apparently would be that Doctor Strange would become obsessed with getting enough power so that he could bring back his love Christine Palmer and somehow avoid her death. Unfortunately, in bringing Christine back, he also caused the destruction of his universe, as her death was considered an absolute point in time, not something that you can basically mess with. In order to even bring Christine back, Strange would have to face off against himself, who was the final defense against what the darker Strange was basically attempting to do here. Strange Supreme defeated himself in the end, absorbing him and resurrecting Christine, which brought about the end of the universe. But hey, he won the fight. Number 10. Darkseid is called. In the Snyder cut of the DCEU film Justice League, we learn that the heroes don't actually save the day. In the original version of the tale, they kinda lose and are too late to prevent the Mother Box from calling out to Darkseid, who arrives on Earth. The Mother Box explodes, seemingly killing our heroes. However, there is one hope left. While technically in this timeline they lose, Barry Allen, aka The Flash, manages to use his superpowers to race beyond the speed of light, turning back time and giving everyone a second chance. Also showcasing how much of a powerhouse the hero can be, and making him one of the most powerful superheroes on the team in this version of the story. So although for a moment they lost, The Flash gives the team a second chance, and this time they do manage to save the day, with Cyborg preventing the Mother Boxes from coming together and reaching out across the cosmos with Superman's help, and Aquaman and Wonder Woman defeating Steppenwolf, who dies while being sent back through the portal to Darkseid on Apocalypse. But that first time around, they all likely died. Number 9. Captain Britain vs. Iska. The Ten of Swords tournament, or the Otherworld tournament, was not what many expected, especially when it came to how poorly our friends over on Krakoa did. I mean, after all, they were supposed to be the heroes in this event, as they faced off against their villainous mutant brethren of Morocco, who were also under the influence of the Amenthi demons led by Annihilation. And it all started with Krakoa's ability to lose hard on that very first battle in this story. I don't know about you, but I was pretty shook after reading that first fight when I was reading this as it was all coming out. The fight went down between Captain Britain, Betsy Braddock, representing Krakoa, and Iska the Unbeaten, a champion of Morocco. The fight lasted 4 pages, and Betsy was swiftly and easily defeated by Iska, with both her sword and herself being shattered into pieces. And friends, before I move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to show some support for us over on another platform, head on over to Facebook where you can give us a like, a follow. We really appreciate it when you do, and we have lots of exclusive content coming your way over there, so yes. Number 8. A League of One. Superheroes don't always lose to supervillains in the comics. In the case of the JLA story A League of One, this time around the League is actually defeated by one of their own, Wonder Woman. However, Wonder Woman doesn't do this to actually cause them harm or kill them, but simply to get them out of the way. This is because the League is facing a dragon, and there's basically a prophecy surrounding that fight that it will cost the band of heroes their lives. Wonder Woman not only manages to defeat the League, even disposing of Superman, who she weakens and then sends on a mission to save the others who she's left in danger, but also does manage to sidestep her doomed fate. Sort of. Wonder Woman was willing to die in the League's place, hoping to spare the rest of the team, but in taking on the dragon by herself, she manages to actually avoid dying. At least dying permanently. She dies momentarily, but is revived by Superman, who arrives just in time to bring her back from the brink of death by giving her life-saving CPR. So she died, but only for a minute. Number 7. Emperor Doom. In this story, Dr. Doom succeeds in taking over the world by using the powers of the Purple Man, who he keeps as his prisoner. This might sound like a lot to put on Purple Man, aka Zebediah Killgrave, whose powers aren't generally depicted as being capable of working on a global scale. However, Doom manages to boost Purple Man's power while also taking it for himself by trapping him within a large psychoprism prison. Surprisingly, Earth actually does pretty well under the rule of Doom. Hunger, crime, and war are pretty much all eradicated under his rule, but at the high cost, of course, of free will of every individual on the planet. In the end, Doom isn't defeated, but actually chooses to relinquish control, becoming bored of the monotony of ruling without any opposition. Number 6. Tower of Babel. In the Tower of Babel event, Ra's al Ghul manages to use Batman's own intel and files on the Justice League to defeat them. No. Really. Batman, being the prepared and paranoid man that he is, basically is revealed to have kept files on each member of the Justice League, noting their weaknesses and also containing contingency plans for how to best defeat them should they ever turn to the side of evil. Ra's gains access to Batman's systems and is able to retrieve these detailed files and plans via his daughter Talia. He uses this information to take on and defeat all members of the Justice League, even managing to seemingly distract Batman by robbing the graves of his parents. In the end, the Justice League recover and win the day, but they are none too pleased with Batman, whose secret intel in essence almost single-handedly allowed Al Ghul to destroy the whole team. Number 5. Days of Future Past. In the Days of Future Past reality, Sentinels rule over North America. Here, many mutants are eliminated with only a few managing to survive, but still with many of them being kept in camps where they are worked until they die and are branded with an M tattoo on their face, so they will forever be recognized as a lowly mutant, unable to escape prosecution. Even many superheroes have been killed in this reality of Earth 811 because they attempted to protect mutants and put a stop on the Sentinels' reign, which also made them targets. One of the main reasons why the Sentinels are successful in taking over in this story is because of the deaths of Senator Robert Kelly, Professor Charles Xavier, and Moira McTaggart, who were all killed by the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Number 4. Death of the Justice League. The Death of the Justice League has kicked off as of issue 75 of the current Justice League series, which started back in 2018, and wow, it is rough. What happens to the Justice League? Well, they face off against Pariah, who himself is from one of the first worlds to be targeted during the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths. He was cursed with basically watching all these worlds die again and again, unable to stop it, despite being one of the first people to warn everyone that Crisis on Infinite Earths was coming. Now, with the multiverse reset following the events of Death Metal, Pariah claims that he sees the signs of the crisis happening again. Desperate to prevent this, his plan is to wipe the slate clean when it comes to the heroes, so that the possible new anti-monitor who will come into existence will have no reason to continue with the crisis. Seems like some flawed logic to me, but this man has also seen some, so I understand his desperation to do whatever he thinks will work when it comes to avoiding another crisis. Number 3. Age of Apocalypse. While the Age of Apocalypse does eventually end, this reality is based on the whole idea of what the world would be like if the big bad villain won, and by big bad villain, we of course mean Apocalypse this time around. Which is precisely what happens here. These events are actually all set into motion by Legion, who accidentally causes the death of his father, Professor X. Legion traveled back in time with a plan to kill Magneto, but Professor X shields Magneto against Legion's attack, dying instead in his place. Apocalypse ends up attempting to take over the world earlier on in his timeline in this universe, the AOA reality of Earth 295. Magneto is the only one who attempts to oppose Apocalypse, and as such, En-Sabah-Nur is mainly successful in his attempt for world domination. Apocalypse would oppress humanity, seeing superpowered beings as superior, and it would be many years before his reign of terror was ended. Number 2. Final Crisis. Which actually apparently wasn't so final, as we have another crisis headed our way now, known as Dark Crisis. But regardless of whether or not it was actually final, Final Crisis was definitely a bad time for Earth. In this story, Darkseid actually succeeds in obtaining and releasing the anti-life equation on Earth. He puts it on the internet where it can be easily seen and then spread. Those who see it basically lose their will to live, becoming enslaved to Darkseid and his will, instead of having their own. Well, in the end, the heroes do manage to break free from the influence of Darkseid and the anti-life equation, defeating Darkseid in the end with a Radion bullet. Darkseid still manages to enslave all of Earth and many of its heroes, for a time being seen as the victor. Number 1. Life 9 of Moira X. Well, this life in the end seemingly gave mutants the information needed to beat the rise of the Sentinels and of AI, it also was a world where they had lost much. If anything, it actually set the stage for the reset of Moira's 10th life, where mutants supposedly won. However, even that victory would be revealed to be more complicated, as Moira's true motives were revealed during the events of the 2021 Inferno series, and it turns out her motives were actually to kinda end mutant kind in a nicer way. Still, just taking this world and this continuity as it is, the mutants here have almost all been exterminated. In this life, Moira joined forces with Apocalypse in an attempt to make a final stand against the all-powerful Nimrod. They would not be successful in killing Nimrod, who had killed so many mutants and had also worked to oppress the humans as well. They would only manage to retrieve the information on how and when the Nimrod came to be, allowing them to succeed, hopefully, in Moira's 10th life, where she and mutant kind had failed in her 9th. However, we also know that that didn't really work out because Nimrod does exist in her 10th life, so basically are the mutants kinda screwed? I think maybe they are. Number 10. Iris West is killed by Professor Zoom. That's right, Professor Zoom actually succeeded at one point in killing the love of Barry Allen's life, Iris West. Eobard Thawne, how dare you? And it would only be fixed by a continuity reset basically. Well, and prior to that, Barry Allen basically dipping from his own reality to go live in the future of the 30th century with an alternate future version of Iris who was kinda made to just exist for him having been reborn there, so it's kinda like his Iris but also not, if that makes sense. And if it doesn't, I mean, fair enough, it's pretty confusing. Iris died after Barry and Iris were married, and after she knew about his secret identity. Professor Zoom, as he was known then, ended up simply finding Iris at a party and phasing his hand through her head to kill her instantly. This loss hurt Barry so much that later on, when he found love with Fiona Webb, who he was engaged to marry, when Professor Zoom attacked them on their wedding day, Barry could not take it and responded by killing the villain. It was after this and a following trial for Barry Allen, where he was actually charged with manslaughter because, you know, he killed Thawne, that Barry left the main reality to go be happy with the Iris of the 30th century. Although that would all get wiped away following the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths, but anyways, ain't that just how it goes when crises come a-knockin'. Number 9. Sisterhood of Mutants. In case you were wondering what was going on in the thumbnail from our previous top 10 times superheroes lost list, I'm here to answer that for you now. What's going on there is Lady Mastermind is in essence keeping Emma Frost trapped in kind of like an illusion, so Emma's like trapped in her own mind. Don't worry though, the White Queen's defeat would only be temporary. This was during the creation of the villainous mutant team known as the Sisterhood of Mutants. Yeah, you might know about the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but did you know there is a sisterhood too? It was led by none other than the Goblin Queen herself, Madeline Pryor, who had a plan for how to deal with everyone as she invaded the X-Men's headquarters. Her plan for Emma was for Lady Mastermind to keep Frost trapped within her own mind by using illusions. This, by the way, is also at a time where Emma Frost is actually one of the good guys, not the bad guys, just to be clear. However, Emma would ultimately fight back against Lady Mastermind and find a way out of this when she surprised Mastermind with her new secondary mutation, her diamond form, which makes her immune to any kind of psionic attack. Emma also kicked butt in her diamond form, landing blows that knocked Lady Mastermind into next week. Yeah, I would not want to be hit by a diamond form Emma Frost. That would hurt a lot. Diamonds are really painful, I'm sure, to be punched with. I mean, I assume a lot of things are, but diamonds especially. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want another list where we talk about the times the superheroes lost, honestly, I didn't think I was going to be able to come up with many of them, but the more I do these lists, the more things come into my mind about all of the times superheroes have lost. So let me know in the comments, and maybe we'll do a part 3. Number 8. Dark Avengers. Sometimes heroes lose, not when villains win against them, but just when villains win in general. That was in essence the case with what happened when it came to the creation of the Dark Avengers. The Dark Avengers were the team of Norman Osborn, who probably just called them, you know, Avengers. No dark implications from his side. That would be pretty suspicious. If it's like, hey guys, look at my team, these are the Dark Avengers. Don't worry, they're totally great people and none of them are villains. Don't worry about it. Seems a little suspect. Their editorial name though was definitely the Dark Avengers from a reader's standpoint, so that's how we know them. This team of villains marketed as heroes came to be after Osborn was given the reins to create his own organization after the fall of S.H.I.E.L.D. Why Norman Osborn, formerly known as Major Villain Green Goblin? Because at the time, he was being celebrated as a hero after defeating Queen Veranke, leader of the Skrull secret invasion on live television broadcast. Norman created his own organization known as Hammer, which was an acronym that he just liked. It actually doesn't even stand for anything. He was just like, I like the name Hammer, make that make sense, let's not worry about it. He also created his own evil Avengers team known as the Dark Avengers during a period referred to as Dark Reign. So if you want to go check it out, You can look up Dark Avengers, you can look up Dark Reign, you can read some cool stuff. Number 7. Death of Green Arrow. Ollie has died a few times, but one of the most iconic deaths of Green Arrow, I would say, comes from the late 80s to 90s series of Green Arrow. Here in issues number 100 to 101, while Oliver Queen was working to infiltrate a team of eco-terrorists, he finds himself tangled up in one of their plots, and is one of the few people who can basically stop a bomb from going off and destroying Metropolis. Well, he can stop it going off in Metropolis, I should say. He can't necessarily stop it from going off, unfortunately. He ends up getting his arm stuck in the detonation chamber and is unable to remove it without the bomb going off. Superman shows up, and somehow this ends up being a problem even Superman can't solve. Superman! In the end, Green Arrow chooses to sacrifice himself to protect the people of Metropolis rather than still save the people of Metropolis, but instead just lose his arm instead of, losing his whole life. I mean, okay. I personally just think DC really wanted to kill Oliver Queen for some reason at this point, because I think Superman had some plans prior to Ollie making the bomb go boom that could have, maybe worked. Bomb 1, Queen 0, I guess. Number 6. Death of Thor. You could say the death of Thor is basically inevitable. When it comes to the world of the Norse gods of Asgard, many of their demises are ruled by prophetic fate. Thor is no exception. We learn this in his fight against his uncle, Kull Borson, the Serpent, in Fear Itself. During the Fear Itself event, Kull Borson escapes from his prison and rises again. The condemned and long imprisoned brother of Odin once more rises to power by feeding on the fear of the people of Earth, naming his own champions who are each gifted a hammer. Thor in turn is destined to battle his uncle, and in so doing unfortunately die. Despite Odin's protests at his son attempting to save Midgard, Thor does do battle with the Serpent, saving Midgard, aka Earth, but at the cost of his own life. That is, of course, until he's next resurrected, as so often happens with our favorite heroes in comics. Sometimes you just gotta defeat a demigorge and then you're back to life. You know how it goes. Man, comics. Number 5. DC vs. Vampires. DC vs. Vampires is another monster mashup of an alternate reality where the heroes of that world are overrun by monsters. In this case, the monsters being, you guessed it, vampires. The loses start, of course, with the very first issue, as the premise for this tale is set up. Okay. Premise. Mary Queen of Blood has been killed, and despite being a villain, she was the only one holding back vampires from all-out war. Andrew Bennett, aka I Vampire, attempts to hunt her killers down in order to find out what is going on and why, and discovers a plot of vampire kind to take over Earth, not just starting a war, but almost completely eradicating the human race, at least eradicating their powers. The plan involves taking over the planet, subjugating the human population, and keeping them around only to treat them basically like cattle. Andrew ends up getting proof, a vial of one survivor's blood, Lex Luthor, which also seems to be weaponized against vampires. He also then decides to head out to the Justice League to warn them, but in the end he is defeated by an already turned Hal Jordan. Hal's evil again, oh gosh, who would have guessed? And that's just the beginning of the story, so it gets a lot more vampires taking over the world, if you like that jam. I personally like that jam. I'm like, yeah, put me in that jam. I like when vampires take over the world. Let's go. Number 4. Purple Man for President. Purple Man's presidency takes place in an alternate reality of Earth 460, and it's actually his rise to power that also creates another alternate universe, a very famous one, in fact, you could say. The reality of Earth 311, aka the 1602 reality. This is because Purple Man initially is imprisoning and killing all heroes alive who still oppose him. But with Captain America, Kilgrave sees a greater threat there. If he kills Cap, Cap will basically become a martyr to the people. So instead, Purple Man simply removes Cap completely from the playing board, but not in such a way that the populace can't rally around, Cap's defeat or death. Kilgrave sends Rogers back to the year 1599, and thereby accidentally creates a superhero reality set in the past, that of 1602. Number 3. Death Metal. During Death Metal, our heroes lost hardcore. That is before they won, but still, they lost at one point. They are lucky they were permitted to stick around, as that is the only way they were able to come back from such a dark place. Pun intended. Because it's Dark Knights, Death Metal, get it? I'll just see myself out. During death metal, the trinity of Superman, Wonder Woman, and of course Batman ended up going against Batman Who Laughs and his cohort Persephone. In the end, the first time around anyways, they lost and the world became reshaped temporarily in a darker image. The trinity were split up, with Wonder Woman reluctantly agreeing to join Batman Who Laughs. She didn't really have much of a choice. That's how she actually got her Chainsaw of Truth though, which I love that Chainsaw of Truth, it's so cool. And that's also how in the end the trinity was able to survive until a point that they could each get free and then basically rejoin back up with one another. Ultimately, Wonder Woman would sacrifice herself to save the multiverse, banishing the dark multiverse and restarting everything, setting it right again after getting a glimpse into the potential future, which we would know as Future State. But before that happened, it seemed as though the core JLA members would be trapped and defeated forever. It was a pretty hopeless time for a little bit there. Number 2. Time runs out. In some cases, antagonists aren't so much people aiming to defeat heroes, but are instead simply seeming natural occurring disasters which cannot be stopped. Sometimes that's the villain of the story. No matter how hard our heroes try, they just can't beat it. That is essentially how Time Runs Out ends, with Iron Man and Captain America being crushed by the unavoidable doom that is the Incursions. Literally crushed. The final incursion smooshed Earth 616 and Earth 1610 together, seemingly ending both universes. However, in the end, Dr. Doom would step up to the plate, accepting the power of Molecule Man and defying the Beyonders by saving the multiverse and creating his own battle world. But before all of that went down, everyone was trying to figure out how to stop these incursions, and ultimately were pretty much failing at doing so. In the end, it came down to infighting between Tony and Steve as everyone else prepared their lifeboats, hoping to preserve at least a few of the best of them. As Steve blamed Tony and the two fought on, the incursions arrived, squishing them and seemingly, at least momentarily, ending everything, but not so much in the end. Number 1. Deceased. If you thought Marvel Zombies was bleak, wait till you head to the DC version of that reality, Deceased. Here, instead of everyone being infected by a traditional zombie virus, it's more comic codified than that. In Deceased, the heroes and villains of the world instead become overtaken by the anti-life equation, which in this case turns them into hyper-violent, seemingly mindless beings driven only by rage. Basically, different versions of zombies. Poor Cyborg even ends up kind of as patient zero in this, spreading said virus to the rest of the population and infecting many beloved heroes the world over. Number 10. One Punch! One of the wildest times I can think of when it comes to a hero getting put in their place would be when Guy Gardner challenged Batman for leadership of the Justice League. Challenging Batman to a fistfight, Guy removed his Green Lantern ring, talking a big game before getting knocked out with one punch. I mean, Guy Gardner normally with his Green Lantern power could easily overwhelm and defeat Batman, let's be real here. But of course Guy's ego would be his weakness here, thinking he could take on Batman without his powers. I mean, Batman might be a human, but he's probably one of the most skilled, experienced, and honestly smartest humans around. So how Guy thought he could stand a chance against him, I honestly have no idea. Although I would have expected him to last a little longer in the fight than about 2 seconds at least. Quite embarrassing. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to let me know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Now get out of that stupid body. I don't know why I said it like that. Could you imagine if Gene said it that way? Also, fun fact, all of my points here are quotes, so if you want to try to guess where they're from before I tell you, feel free in the comments. While there is the what if where Emma gets the Phoenix Force, this isn't the only time that this actually happened. In fact, this has also happened in the main continuity when the Phoenix returned to Earth. For a brief time in Phoenix Endsong, Emma was the Phoenix's host. However, this didn't last too long, as Jean was returned to collect the Phoenix and take it back, as it was considered to be a piece of herself. And of course, seeing that it was too much power for Emma and that it was corrupting her. Emma thought that she could handle the Phoenix Force until Jean came and put her in her place, reminding her that actually, she couldn't. And while insulting her and the Phoenix, also helping to set her and the Phoenix free again from one another. Number 8. Good luck, Pine Martin. I don't know if Wolverine actually deserved this one, but it definitely is something that happened and it was brutal, so hey, we're gonna talk about it. Punisher Punisher in Marvel Knight's Punisher once teamed up with the old Knucklehead to take down a gang of little people. However, Punisher had his own approach to handling them that differed from Wolverine's. Basically, Punisher just wanted to completely destroy the gang, whereas Wolverine seemed more interested in bringing them to justice. Punisher thinks this is because Wolverine is also shorter in stature and is therefore somewhat allied with the gang, and this clouded his judgment. More likely, however, is the reasoning that Wolverine just found Punisher's approach to be simply too brutal. As punishment for this somewhat betrayal, Punisher proceeds to use and mistreat Wolverine severely, blasting off his face, allowing the gang to attempt to remove Logan's limbs, shooting him where the sun don't shine, and finally steamrolling the hero, all while ridiculing him verbally. Number 7. You know this is supposed to be unbreakable glass, right? This is a great one. While Spider-Man and Wolverine were both on the Avengers, they stayed at the Avengers Tower. This was when Peter and MJ were still married, and so MJ was staying there with them. However, after some bad press, MJ left their room in tears while Peter was still asleep. During his pursuit of MJ, he runs into Wolverine, who seems to have also heard the bad news. Wolverine insinuates that MJ might not have messed up so badly and probably wouldn't even be with Peter if she had some brains to go along with all that beauty. Peter's reaction is also additionally aggravated by the fact that the bad news in the press is suggesting that Tony Stark is basically having an affair with the married young actress. Frustrated and upset, Peter picks up Wolverine and tosses him out of an Avengers Tower window. That's really high up. Not only is that a long way down, but the windows are all apparently completely unbreakable, or at least they were designed to be. Ouch. Number 6. We're in my mindscape now. You might be surprised to hear that Emma Frost, who herself has her own list of misdeeds, was at a time the one to call out Professor X for his. Now, granted, if you've been following along with modern comics, then this might not surprise you too much, as a while back it was basically established that Professor X is actually kind of one of the worst people sometimes. When you think about how he trained young students to basically fight, constantly putting them in danger, I mean, kind of makes sense. And then you also learn that the danger room he used to train them with became a sentient AI mutant itself, whose sentience he kind of just chose to ignore so he could keep using it to train young mutants. And when you consider how many times he's manipulated people's minds for reasons he deemed as necessary. I mean, in this case, Emma laid a trap for Charles in his golden boy Scott Summers, aka Cyclops' mind. With Scott's consent, of course, Emma knew that Charles would try to infiltrate Scott's mind, and when he did, she'd be there to give him a taste of his own medicine. And that is exactly what she did, shaming him and blaming him for much of the misfortune in Scott's past. Which, to be fair, kind of true. Emma's kind of right here. Number 5. Professor Xavier is a jerk. Honestly, I could probably just do a top 10 list like this just about Professor X. I love this moment. Maybe one of my favorite X-Men moments ever is when Kitty called out Professor X for being a jerk because he wouldn't let her join the X-Men team. Now, to be fair to Charles, he was doing this to protect Kitty, but to be fair to Kitty, Charles does have a history of training young students to literally go out on dangerous missions at his behest. So honestly, kind of fair. Also, just in general, Professor X can be a jerk, so Kitty wasn't really wrong here. Number 4. Are you angry because I was prepared to do what needed to be done, or because you weren't? Wow. I love this point. In issue number 39 of the 2011 Wonder Woman series, Wonder Woman calls out her teammates for not killing. This might seem strange to you, knowing that Wonder Woman is evidently a huge fan of love, hope, and justice, often trying to find a peaceful way to end conflicts. But at the end of the day, Diana is still an Amazon, and has also been the god of war. She is a warrior, so although she does believe in peaceful resolutions, there are times when she acknowledges that to protect innocence, sometimes blood must be shed. In this case, thousands of people were killed by an enemy who was using humans as food source for his bug-like alien queen, and Wonder Woman almost killed him for it, until she was stopped by Superman. Batman later reminds her that if this villain dies, the blood will be on Diana's hands, to which she retorts, "Are you angry because I was prepared to do what needed to be done, or because you weren't?" Calling out Bruce for how ridiculous his one rule really is. Which, to be fair, I'm kind of on Diana's side here. I feel like she's got some points. Sometimes some villains do need to be removed, I think. Sometimes. In this case, killed thousands of people. Number 3. Don't let me out for a month, no matter what. I think this is probably one of the most heart-wrenching moments on our list, of someone being put put in his place. And while Alfred was the first one to kind of do it in this story, ultimately it's Batman who makes that final call. This happens before Bane had even appeared in comics, but the substance he uses, Venom, actually had. Batman is actually the first one to become a frequent user of the substance, turning to it to help his performance after losing a life on duty as Batman and being unable to apprehend the people behind that crime. However, after realizing he is becoming reliant on it to the point that he even considers ending Jim Gordon's life just to score more Venom, he decides to go cold turkey. While Alfred had quit briefly during this time, Batman calls him back to get his help with kicking the habit, asking Alfred to lock him in the Batcave for a month and not open the door no matter what. When he emerges, he's clean, recovered, and has a newfound sense of purpose. Also, if you were wondering, yes, he does have water and food down there, so he doesn't like starve himself for a month. Number 2. Never imagined you actually had one of these. Oof. This is quite the deep insult from Kitty Pryde, who honestly sometimes can be as cold-hearted as Emma is known to be. At one point, Kitty ended up attacking Emma when she became the Phoenix, also merged with the remnants of Cassandra Nova's psyche. Granted, this all went down in a what-if story, to be clear, but one that is definitely based on a very real perception that the whole X-Men team and school staff have of each other. Proving how powerful she is, Kitty used her mutant phasing powers to stop Emma in her tracks, even as she was turning into her diamond form and even with the Phoenix Force. While Emma was attempting to fight against both the Phoenix and Cassandra Nova in her mind to drop her shields and basically surrender, Kitty snuck up behind her and phased her hand straight through Emma's back, reaching all the way through to the front of her and grabbing her heart along the way, phasing it right through Emma's body. Tossing Emma's heart onto the ground, Kitty then remarks how surprised she was to find out Emma actually had one. Now that is cold. Number 1. Because of you, none of these things will ever happen. You know we had to talk about this one. Talk about putting someone in their place. That is exactly what the Watcher does, whose interaction with Beast here, aka Dr. Hank McCoy of the X-Men, served to inspire this very list. After some meddling with the timeline in an effort to bring back the young X-Men to show Cyclops the error of his ways, Beast is confronted by the Watcher. The Watcher gives him visions of his friends finding happiness in the world. When he says to the Watcher that he doesn't understand the meaning of his warning, as he himself does want his friends to be happy and feel loved, the Watcher responds saying that because of Beast's meddling with the timeline, these are visions of things that will actually never come to pass, entire realities that have been completely wiped out. Ashamed, Beast asks the Watcher for help to set things right again, to which the Watcher responds, "I am the Watcher, I do not act. And you disgust me, Hank McCoy." That's brutal, man. Ugh, I'd be so embarrassed if the Watcher said that to me. Number 10. I will never forgive you for this. Really, there are 2 moments in here where John Johns, aka Martian Manhunter, puts John Stewart, aka Green Lantern, in his place. But I'm going to be focusing on just one for now. Maybe if we do a part 3, I'll gotta tell you about the other one. In this instance, Martian Manhunter was on a mission with Green Lantern. They went to Xanshi to find and disarm a device that threatened to destroy the planet. They managed to find it, but when John Stewart decided to go it alone, seeing Martian Manhunter as kind of dead weight, as someone who was slowing him down, he ended up making the biggest mistake of his life. When he finds the device, he is prepared to destroy it, assured that with his Green Lantern ring, nothing can stop him from doing so, only to find out that it has been completely painted yellow, his one weakness. Without enough time to think of a solution, the device goes off, destroying the planet and all the life on it. Later, amidst the wreckage in the vacuum of space, John, who is still alive thanks to the shield Green Lantern put around him, looks on in shame at Green Lantern. "Thanks to your arrogance and stupidity, I have now seen 2 worlds die. I will never forgive you for this," says Martian Manhunter to John Stewart. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, don't miss out on our content, be sure to click that subscribe button and turn on those notifications so you can keep an eye on when we do more videos like this one. Number 9. See ya! I love this moment. Oh boy, what a wild one. Spider-Man definitely puts the X-Men in their place here, although this is not intended to be a well-earned kind of take fake that moment, it definitely ends up as one. Really, this fight comes out of a miscommunication though. Had Spider-Man fully understood what and why the X-Men were thinking of leaving, he may have not behaved quite as rashly here. Although, then again, this is like earlier on in Spider-Man's life, so maybe he would've. The X-Men in Secret Wars were thinking of leaving where they were stationed near the Avengers and the Fantastic Four, because they felt they were not fully understood and accepted, being mutants. When Spider-Man was exploring and he stumbled upon them and overheard this plan, Professor X called out, sensing Spider-Man's presence, and was instantly slapped aside. While all the heroes call for Spider-Man to wait and listen before reporting their thoughts to the Avengers, he makes quick work of just about all of them, including Colossus, Wolverine, Rogue, Storm, Nightcrawler, and Cyclops, and all at once too. Embarrassing. Number 8. You are never anything more than a sheep in wolf's clothing. Yeah, Stephen Strange Jr. sure had it rough in the Ultimate Comics universe of Earth 1610. In his fight against Dormammu, he is handily put in his place as being the last and least of his line, which is pretty intense and honestly should be an ultimately unfair label, considering that while his father was absent for a good part of his life, his mother Clea, who is also an extremely gifted magic user and actually hails from the dark dimension, raised him. So you'd think he would know better how to handle Dormammu, but apparently not. After Dormammu calls him out for being the least of his line, he uses Strange Jr.'s own clothing to defeat him, wrapping him up so tightly that his head basically pops. Number 7. I was busy remembering to put on all my clothes. Oh boy! The feud between Kitty Pryde, aka Kate Pryde as she is now known, and Emma Frost is a long and involved one, and it reared its head once more in Astonishing X-Men issue number 1 from 2004. Kitty is asked to join the mutant school as a staff member and ends up being late on her first day. When Emma calls her out for this on stage and for making a dramatic entrance in front of the whole student body, Kitty responds by calling Emma out, saying, "I'm sorry, I was busy remembering to put on all my clothes." Emma's, always kind of sexily dressed, so I understand why Kitty would say this, but also, I mean, it's Emma Frost, that's how she do. I love how these two women constantly call each other out though, but then now they're like kind of BFFs. Pretty fun journey for them. Number 6. Aren't you wanted by the police? This is an Outlaws Anonymous. Ouch. This one hurts to go back and read. This comes to us from the first issue of Spider-Man. Well, just starting out here, there are a bunch of moments where both the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man are put in their place during their interaction with one another. First of all, Spider-Man, wanting to join the FF, sneaks into the Baxter building successfully and manages to prove his prowess by defeating the Fantastic Four single-handedly. Meanwhile, they put Spidey in his place when they find out he came looking for a job. One, they insult him for even trying to audition for their team in such an aggressive manner, while also being a wanted potential criminal, someone they would rather never associate with, at least not at this time. 2, they also let him know that they are a non-profit, so they don't actually make money, ridiculing him for even thinking that working for them would be considered a 9-to-5 style job in terms of the pay. Just a big ouch all around. Number 5. I actually think I just became dumber. After battling Korvac, Iron Man becomes the Iron God, and decides to use his newfound power to make the world better. With his newfound power cosmic putting him at God tier, Tony decides to start working his magic first over on Earth. He heads there and decides to grant a gift to all its human inhabitants, making all of them Stark-level geniuses. Most people are shocked by this, but when the Invisible Woman states that she doesn't feel any different and asks her husband, Reed Richards, if he does, he responds with, I actually think I just became dumber. Number 4. I will not go into battle beside someone I do not trust. Tower of Babel is a JLA story where Batman ends up being exposed as an untrustworthy member in the sense that he has plans for how all of his teammates could easily be taken out, keeping records and downright foolproof plans of what to do should they turn to the dark side. This secret is exposed when Ra's al Ghul gets his hands on said plans and uses them. Not only that, but he also almost finds a way to completely derail Batman himself, exploiting his weakness, the loss of his parents, so that he can do nothing to stop him. In the end, the League are able to rise up and beat Ra's, but they are left with the decision of what to do with Batman. Ultimately, they decide to put him in his place by kicking him off the team. Number 3, and this is what I can do. This one will make you cry, so be warned. In issue number 76 of Superman/Batman, Dick Grayson has taken up his father, Bruce Wayne's, role as Batman after his apparent death fighting against Darkseid. Now of course, we'd later learn that Batman didn't actually die, but at the time everyone thought he was dead. After losing his own father, Superman, aka Clark Kent, confronts Dick and tells him he has to take the Batsuit off and give it up. Let Batman go. However, Dick pushes back, telling Clark that he knows he's hurting and he knows that they both miss their fathers, but that being Batman is something that he simply has to do. I know you lost your father and you're angry. You can do anything in the world. Can't bring them back. I lost my father too, and this is what I can do. Ugh. Number 2. Which stage of grieving is this? 2004's Astonishing X-Men issue number 1 is full of moments where the X-Men get in each other's faces, including maybe the greatest one, which actually stands out as one of the biggest feud moments ever in all of X-Men history besides, when Wolverine calls out Cyclops for being with Emma Frost so soon after Jean Grey's death. One of her deaths. Anyways, Wolverine, who is also a member of the staff at the school but was absent from the first day of orientation, makes his first appearance perched on the end of Emma and Scott's bed the morning after. He wakes them up by asking, "So tell me, which stage of grieving is this? Denial?" Which of course prompts Psyche to optic blast him out the window. Talk about a start to the school year. Also, I love how the staff have like more drama than the students. Number 1. I have nothing to say. Wolverine has been having it rough these days. Despite Krakoa being a virtual mutant paradise, he doesn't seem to be getting much of a vacation lately. During Lives and Deaths of Wolverine, he was forced to travel through time in an effort to protect mutant kind by safeguarding the life of Charles Xavier, their leader. And following that, he ended up being mind controlled by Beast, the head of X-Force, who deemed this action necessary for getting the dirtiest of jobs done, since Wolverine without mind control was of course less inclined to obey his orders, and actually I believe even wanted to leave the team. Beast saw this as a necessary evil to protect Krakoa, but once Wolverine was free, he decided it was time to put Beast in his place for all his evil deeds, for once and for all. And honestly, if any hero deserves it lately, it is Hank. He's been traveling farther and farther down a dark path since even before the days of Krakoa. Finally, his treachery came to an end, at least it did for now, after Wolverine took his life in issue number 30 of his own series, with Beast's last words being, "I have nothing to say."